Sit closer, my friends. Let the damp chill of the night surrender to the tireless, hungry flicker of the hearth. Draw your cloaks tight, for the air outside is heavy, heavy with the memory of rain, and heavier still with the spirits that ride upon the mists. The world beyond this circle of light is vast and cold, a territory claimed by powers older than the memory of man. You hear it? That call, the voice of the ancient land, the sound that speaks only in secrets, in omens etched upon the face of the moon and scratched into the dark soil. It is the cry of the crow, the tireless watcher, and tonight we speak of the one who rides upon its black, formidable wings. We speak of Badb. Look out to the hills of Ere, shrouded tonight in their eternal silver veil. That fog is not merely moisture rising from the cool moor. It is the breath of ages, the visible memory of every life lived and every life lost upon these sacred blood-soaked grounds. The mist is the membrane between our world and the other world, and Badb walks its shifting nebulous paths. Long before the great stones were raised, before the first iron blade was hammered into a lethal shape, our ancestors knew that war and death were not simply misfortunes. They were sacred, inevitable forces. They were the twin hands of the sculptor that forever reshaped the world. Death is the necessary ending that makes a beginning possible. War is the consuming fire that forges a new destiny. We do not fear them blindly, we revere them, for they are the work of the gods, the brutal architects of change.
Finally, the hunt had carried them far into the wild heart of the forest. The sun began its slow, golden descent toward the western horizon, casting long, dramatic shadows. Pwyll, separated from his companions by the thrill of the chase, found himself on the crest of a low rise. He reined in his horse, a magnificent, sweating creature, and paused to catch his breath. The air was cool and crisp, scented with pine and damp earth. As he watched the valley floor below him, waiting for the sound of his own hounds, he saw a sight that froze the blood in his veins. Moving silently through a clearing was a stag. Not merely a stag, but one of the largest and most noble he had ever seen. Its antlers were vast, branching like winter trees, and its coat was a deep, velvety brown. But it was not the stag that held Pwyll's gaze. The stag was surrounded by a pack of hounds. They were unlike any creature of the mortal world Pwyll had ever encountered. Their bodies were an uncanny, dazzling white, like the pure, undrifted snow. And their ears were a vivid, shimmering red, as if stained with fresh blood or dyed in the essence of twilight. These were the hounds of the other world, the Coon On. Pwyll knew instantly, instinctively, that he was witnessing something sacred and utterly forbidden. He was staring across the line that mortals must never cross. Yet they were hunting the same stag.
The mist thins now, not dissolving entirely, but gathering itself into a definite shape, a terrible, mesmerizing presence. We must speak her name, Badb, with reverence, but we must steel ourselves against absolute terror, for fear is the very essence she feeds upon. She is one of the triune aspects of the great goddess, the Morrígan, the great queen, But within that fearsome triumvirate, Badb is the raw, unflinching embodiment of the red tide of war. She is not simply a war goddess who chooses a side and favors it with strength. No, she is the essence of the conflict itself. Her divine role is to orchestrate the terrible, beautiful, necessary chaos of the battlefield. It is Badb who rides ahead of the advancing host, not on a war steed, but on a hurricane of fear and bloodlust. She is the invisible general whose tactics are woven from raw emotion. Her duality is what both chills the heart and paradoxically lifts the spirit of the champion. She is the deathbringer, yet she is also the life-giver to the hero whose name she secures in eternal legend. When a warrior falls with honor, his soul is instantly claimed by her, lifted upon the very black wings of the crow she embodies. She cleanses the earth with the blood spilled, preparing it for a new, richer harvest. She is terrifying, yes, a vision of the inevitable end, yet she is also sacred, for she teaches us that only in a brutal confrontation with finality can we truly value the present breath.
Badb's influence in battle is profound. She is the psychological force. The ground becomes slick with the moisture of rain and the spreading slickness of gore. The air is thick with the metallic scent of blood and the sharp, dizzying tang of human fear. Badb moves to this chaos like a shadow given purpose, unseen by the mortal eye, yet profoundly, violently felt. She is the whisper of doubt. It cripples the enemy general, causing him to choose the wrong tactic, to expose his flank, to commit his reserve forces too soon. She is the infusion of battle madness, the ferg, into the hero, a frenzy so consuming that he becomes a blind, unstoppable force of nature, heedless of his own wounds, striking down scores of foes. Her power is to make reality unravel for the doomed. She is the unnerving sound that makes a hero's hand tremble just as he is about to deliver the winning blow. She is the terrifying, cold knowledge in the heart of the warrior that he will not survive the sunset. She is the goddess of divine frenzy, the one who ensures that the war is not just a clash of armies, but a ritualistic bloodletting that serves the ancient destiny of the land. She is the prophecy, the moment of death, and the vessel that carries the soul. She is the sacred terror of the Celtic soul. To the ancient Celts, a name was not merely a label, it was a vessel of potent power. To speak the true name of a god or a force was to invoke its very essence, to summon its strength and its terrible grace. Her full title, Badb Kapha, it translates, simply and profoundly, as the battle crow. We must ask, why the crow? Why not the soaring eagle or the fierce boar? Look closely at the creature, my friends. It is intelligent, black as the deepest night, and it is a creature of the liminal space, the boundaries between life and decay. It is the ultimate scavenger. It is the creature that waits patiently on the outskirts of the battle, knowing with cold certainty what is soon to come. When the hero falls, the crow arrives. It is the earthly manifestation of the goddess herself, sent to feed upon the fallen.
Plych entered the other world. Anwen was a realm of deep quiet and subtle illumination. The light was never harsh, never the blazing gold of a doved summer, but a perpetual silver-grey twilight, like the deep hour before dawn. The air was thick with the scent of 100 unknown vibrant flowers and the cold metallic taste of deep magic. The court of Aran was a place of high echoing halls built of black marble and shining silver. Plych, now wearing the guise of Aran, was immediately recognized and welcomed. He sat upon the throne, and the knowledge of his duties, the history of the realm, and the names of his nobles came to him unbidden, just as Araun had promised. He ruled with a wisdom and dignity he had not possessed as Plugh. He learned to speak with the patience of a king who deals not with decades, but with centuries. He learned to hunt the strange, glittering beasts of Anwun's plains. He feasted with the lords and ladies, sampling wines that tasted of stars, and meats that dissolved on the tongue like a dream.
Yet, the core of his year of trial was the chamber he shared with Aeron's wife. She was everything Aeron had described, gracious, beautiful, and utterly devoted. Every night, after the feasting and the affairs of the realm were concluded, Pwyll would accompany her to their chamber. The temptation was immediate and relentless. Pwyll was a young, virile man, and the Queen of Anon was a stunning example of grace. She offered him no temptation herself. She treated him with the calm affection and expectation due to a beloved husband. But every night, Pwyll restrained himself. He would speak a few gentle words to her, expressing his contentment with her presence. Then they would lie down on the vast, soft bed. Every single night, for 366 nights, Pwyll would turn his back to her, facing the cold, silent wall. He would keep his hands clasped tightly beneath the furs, his mind fixed firmly on the image of his own Dyvet, and the promise he had given to Aeron. He did not touch her hand, he did not speak a word of intimacy. He merely existed beside her, a living statue of honor and self-control. And every morning, the queen would wake up, kiss him lightly on the cheek, and believe he was truly her husband, Aeron. This discipline was a forge. Pwyll was not merely avoiding a transgression, he was building a new inner kingdom. He was learning the difference between a simple pleasure and a sacred vow. He was cultivating the moral strength that separates a petty lord from a true sovereign. The lords and ladies of Anon watched their king. They saw that he rode out later and stayed out longer on the hunt. They saw his mood become more thoughtful, his voice more measured. They remarked to one another that their King Aeron had become a better, gentler ruler, whose strength was now tempered with a new, profound patience. Pwyll was growing into the idea of Aeron. He was shedding the impulsiveness of the mortal world and gaining the timeless wisdom of the other world. He was becoming a man worthy of the kingship of Dyvet. The year of silence and restraint passed swiftly, marked only by the strange, shimmering cycles of Anon's twilight sky. Then came the final, fateful night, the night of the duel.
The appointed day arrived. Pwyll, dressed in the gleaming, pale silver armor of Auren, rode out to the ford of the two worlds. He was alone, as tradition demanded, with only the silent, immense landscape of Alnuen for company. At the ford, standing waist-deep in the dark, cold water, waited Hafgen. Hafgen was a figure of terrible, magnificent strength, clad in black iron, his face grim with the long memory of their rivalry. The silence between them was profound, broken only by the lapping of the water. This was not a mortal battle of shouts and bloodlust. It was a silent, ritual confrontation of destiny. Hafgen spoke first, his voice booming across the water. "I see you, Auren. You have returned for your inevitable defeat. Let us finish this wearying contest." Pwyll, remembering Auren's wisdom, raised his great silver shield. "Tonight, Hafgen, the contest ends." The two kings rushed forward. The clash of steel was loud and sharp, echoing off the eternal hills.
They fought with the power of ancient rivals, locked in a dance of fate. Pool fought with the strength of a mortal, unburdened by the curse that afflicted Aeron. In a moment of blinding speed, Pool found his opening. He brought his long enchanted spear to bear. He struck Halfdan in the center of his shield, thrusting with all the force of his accumulated year of self-denial and honor. The blow found its mark. The spear pierced the shield, then the armor, sinking deep into Halfdan's body. The Otherworld King cried out, a profound sound of surprise and finality. Halfdan staggered back, leaning on his shield, his strength draining away into the cold water. Alas, Halfdan whispered, his voice weak. This is the blow of death. I see now that destiny is fulfilled. He looked at Pool, whom he believed to be Aeron. I yield the sovereignty, Lord Aeron. You have won fairly. See that my chieftains serve you. And with that, the king of the rival realm of Onwon collapsed into the water.
Pui rode out from the black marble halls of Onwon and back to the edge of the forest of Glyn Cwch, the place of his original transgression. There, waiting by the old moss-covered oak, was Aron, king of Onwon. He was once again clad in his shimmering gray, and he greeted Pui, still in the guise of Aron, with a wide, generous smile. They dismounted from their horses. The atmosphere of both worlds seemed to hold its breath. "Welcome back, Pui, Prince of Dyfed," Aron said. "Welcome back, Lord Aron," Pui replied, and they exchanged their guises once more. The subtle change rippled across the forest floor like a wave. Pui was Pui again, filled with the warmth of the living world. Aron was Aron, regaining the profound, ancient weight of the other world. Aron looked upon Pui with immense respect. "Tell me all, Pui. Tell me how you governed and how you guarded the secret of my wife." Pui recounted his year, the ruling, the hunting, the feasting, and the silent nights. He spoke of his discipline, the promise he had kept, and the purity. Pwyll, Prince of Dyfed, lived out his days in prosperity and renown. But from that moment on, his people gave him a new sacred name, a title that spoke of his journey and his triumph. They called him Pwyll, Prince of Anon, Pwyll Pen Anon. Not because he was the king of the other world, but because he was the friend of its king, Araun. His honor was so great that the very boundary between the worlds seemed to recognize and bow to his virtue. The story of Pwyll and Araun is an echo of deep truths. It is a lesson that true power lies not in the sword nor in the crown, but in the restraint of the self. Pwyll's original sin was one of thoughtless greed.
It was a tear in the very fabric of the air, a psychic weapon that echoed not in the ears, but in the marrow of the bone. It was Bob's shriek, a high, terrible keening that seemed to emanate from the ground, the clouds, and the very deepest corners of the mind. This sound instantly crippled the discipline of the fir bog. Into their hearts, the goddess poured a blinding, crippling terror. Their formation began to waver. Men swore they saw phantoms moving in the dense fog, monstrous shadows with blazing eyes. Their shields, which moments before felt light and familiar, grew impossibly heavy. Bob's influence was the great unraveling. She whispered lies and confusion into the enemy's ranks. "The man beside you is a traitor. Your captain has fled." This psychological venom caused the fir bog to strike their own allies, to abandon their posts in blind panic, to discard their weapons and simply run, only to be swallowed by the merciless mist. The Tuatha De Danann, by contrast, were infused by a controlled, purposeful battle madness, a ferg that felt like divine wind beneath their feet. They knew the screams were Bob's, and they took them as a song of encouragement. They pressed the advantage, moving through the fog like avenging shadows, slaughtering an enemy already defeated by their own fear. The ground drank deep that day, sucking down the brilliant arterial red of the fallen. And on the high cairns overlooking the field, the battle crows gathered, a black, silent parliament. Bob had reaped her harvest. The land was cleansed, made fertile with the blood of the old order, preparing it for the new reign of the Tuatha De Danann.
The victory at the first Moitura was a beginning, but it was not the final trial. The Tuatha De Danann now faced a foe whose power was truly terrifying. The monstrous, chaotic Fomorians, led by the terrible, one-eyed king, Balor of the Evil Eye. The destiny of all Eri hung on the edge of the blade at the second battle of Moitura. This time, the involvement of the Phantom Queen was a direct alliance. Bob and her sisters came not just as harbingers of doom, but as fierce, terrifying patrons of destiny. Their chaos would be pointed, channeled with brutal efficiency against the monstrous invaders. The most pivotal moment occurred before the armies even clashed, on the eve of Samhain, the night when the veil between worlds is gossamer thin. The Dagda, the good god, went to the river Unius, and there he found the Morrígan. Badb and her sisters merged into one terrible majesty, standing in the water, washing herself, a ritual of cleansing and prophecy. She promised the Dagda victory. She foretold the movements of the Fomorian host, detailing exactly where his champions must strike. And in return for this unshakable knowledge, the Dagda submitted himself to her power, a union that bound the fertility of the king to the terrifying sovereignty of the goddess. When the great battle finally exploded onto the field, Badb and her sisters flew above the fighting, not just as three birds, but as a dark storm of power. Their keening was directed precisely against the Fomorians. It was a sound that cracked the courage of the giants, that instilled despair so deep that some simply stopped fighting, waiting for the killing blow. Badb brought the white-hot battle fury, the ferg, to the champions of the Tuatha De Danann. They fought with a divine energy, moving through the monstrous lines like the sickle moves through wheat. The Fomorians were routed, Balor was slain, and the order of the gods was secured. But the crow would have the final word. The moment the last Fomorian body fell, Badb stepped forward, not as a crow, but as a regal, terrifying queen, and delivered her terrifying prophecy, the ultimate doom of Ireland. She foretold the darkening of the world itself. Her voice was a low, chilling dirge that spoke of a future without glory, a slow decline into chaos. "I shall not see a world that will be dear to me," she intoned. "I see the winter coming, with summer devoid of flowers. The sea shall grow sterile, youth will turn traitor to his elders. Justice will be abandoned for greed, and evil will rule over all that is good. Badb, the goddess of death, foretold the death of the age itself. This is the ultimate truth of the crow. All things, even gods and ages, must eventually submit to her final, necessary, transforming silence.
Badb's terror is often grand, slaying 1,000 men with a single shriek. Yet her most poignant and emotionally devastating appearances are reserved for the individual hero. She is the goddess who makes doom utterly personal, forcing the doomed to look upon their own end before it arrives. Her legend is woven into the tragic fate of Cormac Condolinges in the sorrowful tale of the destruction of Dé Derkis Hostel. Cormac was a man of noble birth, but he was doomed, bound by prophecies and broken oaths, driven by an inescapable fate toward his final ruin. As he traveled toward the hostel, he came upon a ford, a shallow crossing of a lonely river, and there, standing ankle-deep in the cold, fast-flowing water, was the vision of his fate, the washer at the ford.
She was an old woman, pale as bone, her face a map of sorrow and ancient knowledge. She was utterly absorbed in her terrifying task. She stood washing armor and clothes, but the linen and the metal mail were not being cleaned. They were already stained a brilliant fresh red. The blood, vibrant and warm, spread outward from the fabrics she scrubbed, tinting the clear stream water until the river ran with the color of arterial life. The sound was mesmerizing and horrific, the tireless slosh of the washing and the constant gurgle of the water, flowing, taking the red stain downstream. Cormac, brave but resigned, asked her what she washed. The washer stopped her scrubbing. She looked up, and her eyes held the cold knowledge of all the tombs in Era. She spoke, her voice low and husky, a sound like dry leaves scraping on stone. I washed the armor, the tunics and the shields of the king and his host, the clothes of Cormac Condlongs, for they are all about to fall in battle tonight, here on the edges of this water. I prepare their shrouds before their breath leaves their bodies.
The washer at the ford is one of Badb's most ancient, most unyielding guises. She is the visual embodiment of inevitable doom. She is the goddess preparing the garments of the dead before death has struck, showing the hero that his destiny has run its course. Her act is a terrifying courtesy, a chance for the warrior to accept his fate with open eyes. The red stain is the undeniable proof that time has run out. Cormac looked upon the spreading red stain. He knew this vision was a divine truth he could not fight. He continued on, his steps measured, toward the hostel, toward his ruin. He continued because to deny Badb's prophecy is to deny the essential truth of the heroic life, that death is the glorious, necessary conclusion to a life well lived. The crow had claimed his soul before the battle began, and the river ran red with the certainty of his doom.
We have spoken at length of Badb's terror, her shrieks, and the blood she demands. Yet to see her only as a demon of destruction is to miss the profound wisdom hidden within the shadow of her wings. Badb is not merely an ending. She is the brutal, beautiful force that guarantees a new beginning. She is transformation. She is the dark, cold hand that understands that nothing can grow, nothing can be reborn, unless something first dies and surrenders its substance to the earth. This deep wisdom links her intimately to the figure of the Kayech, the divine hag, the crone of winter. In the ancient traditions, the Kayech is the force that rules the dark half of the year, the goddess of winter and storms. She is the sovereign of the wild land. She is the force that pulls the life out of the summer earth, covering it with frost and the hard, undeniable structure of rock.
Badb is the Kaliak on the battlefield. She is the winter of the soul. She strips away the vanity, the illusion, the weakness of the mortal spirit. When she causes confusion and terror, she is preparing the soul for its final necessary transition. She is the one who demands the surrender of the body so that the essence, the soul, and the story can endure. Think of the year, my friends. The summer must surrender to the decay of autumn, and the autumn must be slain by the brutal clarity of the winter. Badb is that sacred annihilating clarity. When she brings death, she is not merely taking a life, she is making space. She ensures the blood spilled on the soil enriches the earth, guaranteeing the prosperity and fertility of the next harvest, the next generation. This is the cycle of sovereignty. Her darkness is therefore a dark, powerful beauty. It is the fierce beauty of a storm that tears down the rotten wood, the terrible necessity of an ending that allows for new growth. She forces us to confront the finality of our own breath, and in that confrontation we find the courage to truly live. She is the ultimate, cold, silent promise. Death feeds new life. The crow flies away with the husk, but the seed remains, buried deep in the earth. This is the ultimate comfort hidden within the terror.
The embers glow low now, casting long, fading shadows upon the wall of the ancient dwelling. We have journeyed deep into the shadow of Badb, the battle crow, the phantom queen. We have heard her shriek on the wind and watched her terrible purpose unfold. We have gathered the secrets of her terrible power. What does she leave with us, this goddess of war and death, this keeper of the final transition? Not a message of comfort, but one of fierce, unyielding clarity. She teaches us the necessity of endings. Every life, every age, every great deed must conclude. To cling to the past, to resist the fall, is to deny the inevitable beauty of the future. She is the wind that cleanses the debris, the purifying fire that burns the old wood so the new can thrive. She is the wisdom that whispers, "Be fierce in life, for death is always waiting."
She forces us to acknowledge that the true heroic ideal is not just the moment of victory, but the courage to face the inevitable. The warrior who knows that the crow waits for him, yet still lifts his shield in the fight for what is right, is the true champion. His story, guaranteed by his death, is the only lasting thing. Badb does not judge. She simply transfers. She moves the soul from the fragile container of the body into the eternal container of myth and memory. She ensures that the energy of the fallen feeds the future of the living.
And so the fire draws low. The secret is shared, the ancient song sung. But listen closely, my friends, as you leave the circle of the hearth and walk out into the vast, dark silence of the night. Listen for the rustle of black wings high above the hills vary. Do not mistake that sound for simple night flight. It is the eternal flight of the crow, the constant vigilance of the goddess. It is the promise that she is still watching, still guarding the boundary between this world and the other. She is the final certainty. She is always there, on the edge of the mist, in the cold, metallic scent of the damp earth, in the quiet wisdom of the winter wind. She is Badb, the transformation, the end, the beginning.